So in this 40K podcast, we're going to look at Way of Saim-Hann, part 1 of 6. What I'm going to try and do is look back over the years of playing my Saim-Hann Warhost and identify those key points. And I've talked about this in other podcasts and other Tactica videos up on my channel and my blog, but I want to not only break it down step by step, but in some places where I talked briefly about certain concepts, I want to drill down, because part of this, what I realize, and this is the duality of any type of YouTube channel, I don't know who's listening to this. I'm trying to connect to you through the webway there. We've got the spirit stones and everything. But ultimately, I don't know your experience in 40K. Are you new to it? Have you been playing for a while? Are you returning to 40K? I don't know the composition of your meta, your local gaming group. Is it big? Is it small? Do you play big games, small games, narrative games, completely competitive games on there? So with that entry point, I realize, and this is natural, I talk about things that are familiar to me, that are key concepts, because they've just been ingrained in my mind for so long. I want to make sure I miss nothing on that. So a brief background as a foundation. Certainly, if you go to my channel, whatever your entry point is for this podcast, go to the Warhammer 40K playlist. You're going to see some entries for Saim-Hann, for mobility, for Eldar. That's a good primer. That's a good background. But to build on that a little bit, so you don't have to click out, go listen to that, and come back. In 2006, the end of 2006, I wanted to start a new Eldar army. I wanted to return to that army. I was playing Space Wolves, and I wanted to play some Xenos on there and get some Space Elf magic. And in doing that, I wanted to do jet bikes. I wanted to do Saim-Hann, all jet bikes, all mech'd up, all very fast on there. And this was the genesis of really my thought process in 40K, where, yes, I want to win. I do. I want to put down my best game, and I want to win. But at the same time, realizing that we're going to play a lot of games. I want to play an army that I've fallen in love with, an army that I can connect. And we see this iteration through the ages with my Black Templars, with my Berserkers of Scalathrax, with my Tyranid army on there. So these self-imposed limitations were not what are the best units in 40K for whatever edition. It's more like, here's the theme. Here's what I want to try. So let's think about that, and let's make that happen somehow on there. Let's look at the tactics. Let's identify the weaknesses and the places where it's weak. How can we make it less so, or keep our opponent busy that they can't exploit that weakness? And the places that it's really strong, let's kind of double down, triple down, pour everything into that on there. I really know I wanted a lot of jet bikes, and I didn't realize at the time how god-awful the Viper model was, but I really liked the Viper model, and you didn't see many on the table, so I know I wanted that to be a backbone of it. So certainly in the narrative, like every craft world, and the entry point in for Saim-Hann is the list. You're going to have to start thinking about the list, the models you want to play, and the experiences for it. And I should say, honestly, I love my Grey Knights too. I love all my 40K armies. With my Saim-Hann Warhost, it has been 90% the same list since 2006. Since 4th edition, 5th edition, 6th edition, 7th edition, 8th edition, probably 9th edition, most likely 10th edition on there. The only thing that swaps out is maybe a 20% resources, different aspect warriors, going into the Wave Serpents and stuff like that. Just to have some diversity, just to kind of mix things up and cycle through some of the other models that I have. But the core jet bikes, Vipers, Wave Serpents, Wave Serpent chassis, everything fast, everything furious, everything flying on there. So what I realized, though, because it didn't quite start out that way. Remember, my list originally was Vipers and jet bikes. So what I realized, and this is certainly the Saim-Hann Warhost in the narrative has access to all the stuff, all the Eldar Craft World things. So if you wanted to play the Vol weapons on there, the support platforms and stuff, you could paint it up red. You could do it. They have access to Rangers. They have access to Wave Serpents and Ghost Warriors and things like that. Absolutely. But the narrative doesn't always translate to the tabletop on there. And what I found was you need to have everything in your list. I found I needed to have everything in my list fast on the different spectrum end. Now in 40K, previous editions, things were fixed movement, right? We kind of moved 6. We could boost 12. We could boost 24. Maybe there was a D6 movement for slow and purposeful, take 2D6, take the highest, things like that. But the movement was very fixed into these roughly three bands. Now things move a lot faster and everything, so I can divide that up to stuff that moves fast, up to a high end, and stuff that moves regular or slower. Yes, it's spread out a little bit more, but it still really holds true. So in taking jet bikes and taking Vipers and in taking fast units, what I found out really fast, because the first couple of games I played Rangers. I wanted them to be a core tactic. Later on, they spilled over into my Harlequin list. I love Rangers. I love the idea of snipers. I played them in Battletech, played them in Chain of Command. But what was happening was, with my fast models, they were able to work as a wolf pack. They were able to work as kind of one massive unit and use the speed on the table to be where they need to be. And I define that as to take 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% of my model resources and focus them on 1 or 2 units and make those 2 units go bye-bye in a turn, or realize I made a mistake or the player is pushing aggressively and I need to fade away, I need to move. You literally have the entire table to move, and you can pretty much be anywhere you want to be in one turn. Not only moving fast, but also the ability to move over things. Terrain is important in 40K, but it pretty much takes care of any type of weird terrain pieces or ways of blocking, or if your opponent's going to kind of use trash mobs and things like that. So what I found was in playing the Rangers, they were slow. They were static units. They got into place. They bolted down. They hunkered down. They got torn down really fast, because I wasn't going to, if I kept the rest of my jet bikes and Vipers and Wave Serpents in a vicinity to deal the maximum amount of dice to support them, well, then I was giving up on mobility. That's the very thing of the list. You're taking all of your model resources and putting it into mobility. If I need to stick around 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 units, or I have a 50-50 division between fast and normal, I'm spending points for stuff I'm not utilizing. And if I leave the Rangers, or if I leave them, plant them in a great place, put them up on some, building or hill, they've got cover, they've got line of sight, they got range, they got everything. Well, my opponent's able to isolate those and deal with them. It was almost like, I was playing with 1 or 2 less units with it. So I found out really quickly, and that's not to say you can't play them. That's not to say you can't work. This is just my experience. With all my podcasts, I want you to take it, utilize it, mix it in with your local meta, mix it in with your play style, and evolve to something there. I found if I was going to do jet bikes and Vipers and fast-moving stuff, 100% everything needs to be poured into that. That's not to say I didn't have a Wave Serpent that, in theory would land and the doors would open and Banshees would get out, or Fire Dragons would get out, or Storm Guardians would get out, or Vanilla Guardians would get out. Certainly that is possible because you have that ability to deploy and redeploy. But Wraith Lords, Guardians on foot, things that start out on foot were a real hindrance. They were not an optimized use of the points when I'm trying to load up in a maximum overdrive. Pour everything into the movement phase. So that's the list part. We're going to look at part 2, this idea of utilizing speed, because that is the advantage. That is still the advantage. It's not as big as an advantage as it was in previous editions of 40K, because Games Workshop keeps inflating models more and more, get more and more stuff on the table, people playing bigger and bigger games. The table size hasn't increased. The standard size hasn't increased. So some slight changes there, but we need to look at, okay, if I'm going to be the fastest on the table and I'm going to have the most mobility, actually I should replace mobility with speed, because certain armies are still fast and other units have been sped up, but Saim-Hann has the mobility on there. So we need to, in part 2, look at that mobility, use that mobility. Leverage and minimize, minimize when our opponent tries to shut down our mobility. That's the second part. And part 3, I would say absolutely, and this is true for every Eldar army, but vital vital for Saim-Hann to leverage that. Space elf magics, psychics, absolutely. I mean, that's always been a backbone of an Eldar war host, but we want to, it's increased with Saim-Hann Warhost because you have the space elf magics, which are potent, but you have them tied to mobility, which is massive, massive, massive on there.